Hey everybody, welcome back to brunch if you've been here before, and welcome to brunch if this is your first time. My name is Hollis, and I am elated to host this incredible lineup of organizers and strategists, all of whom are Asian American, to get out the Asian American vote. It is the weekend of the election. It's already been the election. Millions upon millions of people have cast their votes already, and the voter turnout is extremely heartening, but there's also a lot of votes and a lot of ballots on the table still, and we cannot leave any vote unturned or ungrabbed from our community to make sure that every voice is counted by Tuesday night. So I am elated to bring in the ED from AAPI, Progressive Action, to kind of set the stage before we introduce the grassroots organizations that we're raising money for today, as well as a couple of key influencer strategists that are joining us as well. I want to give a big shout out also to Lion Share, who's letting us stream this on their Twitch channel. Really love and appreciate y'all. And please, if you're tuning in, please feel free to hit us in the chat with any comments and questions and messages of encouragement you may have for this incredibly important work. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome on our first of many guests today, because it's all AZNs on deck. You know what I mean? To talk about where we're at in the national landscape, why it's important to focus on the Asian American voting bloc, and where we're at heading into the next 72 hours of the election. So please welcome Varun to the stage. Hey, Varun.
How are you?
I'm really well. How are you doing?
I'm exhausted, but I'm living on this adrenaline that I hope, one day very soon, in like the next 48 hours, it sort of starts to curtail. But I'm so excited about I think what's gonna happen on election night.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious if you could just introduce yourself, let us know about AAPI Progressive Action, and just like some tidbits or frame, really. I'd love like a bit of framing before we dive into these conversations with grassroots organizers in terms of the trends that you're seeing, the data points that are really exciting or the ones that are of concern. What are you really focused on heading into the next 72?
Yeah, so AAPI Progressive Action is an organization that was founded in 2017 to essentially sort of fight back Donald Trump's egregious policies, right? And so essentially what we've done is constructed a communication mechanism so that we can get out information to the community so that they can fight back, right? Fight back on the Trump's policies on immigration, on essentially restricting our people in this country in a multitude of ways, right? Just pick up a daily newspaper, you would have known what he's done. But as obviously we gotten closer to this election, we've pivoted more towards electioneering and doing work that communicates with our community, but with a little bit more of a persuasive message. And then as we got sort of, in the last 30 days, 45 days or so, it's all been about get out the vote. What I'm sort of seeing right now are some very favorable trends in the areas where and the geographies that AAPIs live. And where is that? I mean, we are practically in every battleground state in the country. We're in, we've got large Hmong populations in Wisconsin and in Minnesota. Obviously, we have a large Indian and Chinese population in Michigan. And, and as we get to the Sun Belt, I think all the communities are represented. Most of our focus, frankly, has been what I call the big dosa. You could also call it the big green onion pancake, which is Texas. And, it's really hard to turn on the news these days and not hear about the fact that Texas is within the margin of error. The last 30 polls have shown Biden and Trump within, say, this plus or minus, to margin. And what we're seeing there is extremely heartening, right? We've seen overall turnout in Texas break a record. Last Thursday, which was a day before their early vote ended, they essentially had more folks vote in their early voting period than they did in the entire 2016 election. So that is just amazing. Well, just today I learned, maybe less than an hour ago, that AAPI turnout in Texas is up 151% over 2016. So what does that mean? By election day, we are on the we are on track essentially to double the turnout. We got to make that happen. I mean, and folks like us, Progressive Action and the API Victory Fund, They See Blue, Save Texas, Dacey's United, Asian Americans Against Trump, whole host of folks are all sort of galvanizing. They're looking at all the battleground states, but they, are looking at Texas specifically with a keen eye. Why? Texas is the battleground that has the most amount of APIs than any other state in the country, close to 1 million. So a lot to do if you're listening right now and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I spend these last 48 hours? I'm sure on Facebook, and we'll put some in the chat as well, some links that you could go to essentially to do text banking or phone banking and that sort of thing.
That's so exciting. Thank you so much for breaking that down. And yeah, I think this is the trend that we're going to hold most dear as we are seeing it. It's that fact that a number of people, especially API voters that voted in 2016, have already come out in 2020. So I think that's a huge testament to the grassroots organizing work, both on the national scale that AAPI Progressive Action reflects, as well as the work on the ground from the grassroots organizations in states, making sure that we're turning out for those critically important local elections, those state legislature elections, and then obviously to make sure that we get the electoral votes that we need to get Trump out of here. So with that said, I'm actually going to bring on everybody else that's our guest today. Thank you so much, Varun, for setting the stage for us. And we're going to be bringing in folks from North Carolina, Arizona, as well as David and Day, two of our influencer organizers that are joining us. So please welcome Ricky, Jennifer, Day, and David. It's like a Brady Bunch of Asian American progressives. Welcome y'all to brunch. Appreciate you guys showing up. So Varun, thanks so much for kicking us off. I'm curious, Ricky, why don't we just kind of go around in this clockwise moment, but let's just each have a moment to introduce ourselves, the work that we're doing. If you're eating something for brunch, let us know what you're eating for brunch, as well as, where your head's at right now in terms of the work that you're doing. So Ricky, go ahead and set us off.
Thanks for having us, Hollis. My name is Ricky Long. I use he, him pronouns with the organization North Carolina Asian Americans Together in Action, NCAAT for short. And we are a progressive organization here in North Carolina to make sure the Asian American voices are represented. APIs in the South are often ignored as APIs and as Southerners. There's a growing demographic of us here in North Carolina. It's the fastest growing racial demographic here. And so over the past 4 years, we've been really trying to make sure that our communities are educated about the process of getting out the vote. And over the past few months, we've been really driving hard with phone banking, text banking, going out to grocery stores and churches to make sure that our communities have what they need to get out the vote. And just yesterday I was out at some early voting sites with our some of our local elected officials. Some of them are even recent grads, to make sure that our communities are getting out the vote, from South Asian communities to Chinese American communities, and Martin Yard communities and other Southeast Asian communities. North Carolina is home to one of the largest Martin Yard populations in the country, in the world actually. So it's really exciting. We've already had more Asian Americans in North Carolina out to vote than in 2016, all of 2016. There's still a lot of work to do. So next couple of days, we'll be driving hard to do that and providing space for our young people also to come out and engage all of our communities.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. The youth vote is so important. All right, Jennifer, from Raleigh to Phoenix, we're going to hit you. Please let us know a little bit about yourself and the organization that you represent.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Jennifer Chow. I use she, hers pronouns. So I'm the founder executive director for Arizona AANHPI Advocates. We're a C4 organization. We just started in June. So we are very new, but we've been doing a lot in our community to make sure that our AANHPI communities are getting out the vote and voting blue. That's our focus. So one of the things that we've been doing, we have been doing in-language digital mailers, phone banking, text banking, and everything is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander focused. So when we do the outreach, it's like the list will be that, like, we're texting in the Asian community, we're doing mailers in the Asian community, and we just launched our canvassing 3 weeks ago. It's just been a little difficult during pandemic because of the pandemic, but we're getting regular COVID testing. We have all the PPEs, so we're doing canvassing in LD17, which has the highest AANHPI population, and that district in 2018 Senate race went to a Republican with a margin of victory of 1,700. So, but in that year, it was a really low turnout for the Asian community because not too many people are doing the outreach to make sure that they're educated on the candidates or like issues or anything in general. So they haven't been turning out. So that's why we're focusing on that district as well, because, I think once there was a survey that we even went out that said that, they're not being targeted or outreached by any parties or nonprofits. So that to me is probably mainly the main reason why the Asian community out here in Arizona aren't turning out. But the latest data that I saw, I think it was yesterday, they were just looking at like the voter turnout in each population, and I think I saw it was close to 70% of registered AAPIs in Arizona has turned in their ballots. So that's a really good sign. I have a data even in 2016 that says that 52% did not vote in the API community in Arizona versus 38% of all the other ethnicities. So that to me is a really good sign, and I'm really hoping that they are voting Democrat.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Thank you so much. And I forgot to say this, two things. One, I'm actually in Phoenix right now, so I'm going to be joining you right after this brunch and canvassing in LD17 to try to get out this horrible, horrible state legislator who is super anti-trans, super anti-gay rights, and just in general, just a total hater with hella power. So we hate to see it, and we love to get him out in favor of a South Asian Democrat in the legislature. And then I will also need to give a shout out because Jennifer actually dropped off a donut. She actually dropped off a dozen donuts for me from Donut Parlor from Tempe, and including this H donut, which I'm really, really excited about. So I'm going to be eating this for brunch. Cool. Okay, awesome. Well,
quick thing, I want to show that I am drinking coffee and this beautiful Asian Moms Against Trump cup that I got.
Yeah, let's get a close up of that.
Yeah, this is my go-to coffee cup at the moment.
And amazing.
Yes. So, and I got this little pastry. My brother drove by from California. He came to visit yesterday, so he brought some pastries. So that's what I'm having today for brunch.
Very cool.
You have to be a mom in order to drink from that, or because I want one.
I'm gonna get you one, Varun.
We'll make it happen. Awesome. Cool. Why don't we go over to Day now? Day just got back to Seattle, where he lives, from Atlanta, Georgia. So Day, could you just let us know a little bit about you and the work that you've been doing this election cycle?
Yeah, thank you. I just got back from Atlanta. It was a interesting, crazy trip, which I'm sure we're all experiencing the chaos leading up to Tuesday. I'm hoping it's 48 more hours of stress, but it's probably going to be just a little bit longer than that. But yeah, I am currently in a role for Grassroots Law Project under the title Director of Talent and Strategic Partnerships, transferred over from this viral video company world called cut.com. And so at Cut, I was doing a lot of building out their talent department and what's the non-political term for surrogates? I guess like ambassadors, like an ambassador program. Took all the skill sets I learned there, working more directly in grassroots organizing / politics again, and trying to build out what partnerships can look like with influencers, celebrities, etc. If I'm not doing that full-time gig, I am organizing on more of the grassroots level here in Seattle, where Hollis is also from as well, doing a lot of the defund / reallocate to community resources efforts here in Seattle, Washington, and King County as a whole, doing a lot of more of the comms and the media strategy side, but also the direct organizing. And so trying to navigate how to intersect both of the paid work that I do / the organizing work that I do has been fun, challenging, stressful, but I'm excited for Tuesday, honestly, to be over, but us to put as much effort to get to the finish line as possible. And I think, we should feel encouraged by just at least the general voter turnout that we've been seeing so far. I have a lot of mixed feelings about voting, if I'm being honest, in general. Obviously, I'm here and I believe in participating in democracy, and especially voting out the current president. But I know, especially on the grassroots level, there's a lot of mixed feelings about just how much we can keep elected officials in general accountable. But I think overall, no matter what, seeing this type of civic engagement, especially from those who've been previously disenfranchised, has been encouraging. And I saw a lot of that in Atlanta happening, and I can share more about that later. But I appreciate y'all having me.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sure am. 8 months of this shit, and I'm still muting myself and talking. Thank you, Day, so much for sharing that. But also just, I'm really excited to hear more about the work that you did in Atlanta on behalf of Grassroots Law Project. And thank you also for underscoring that, for our communities, like, it's not as so simple as saying that we are empowered by the voting process, right? I think that there's obviously a lot of complexity when it comes to civic engagement and what the voting process is. And, the reality is that we're fighting against a system that is kind of inherently that of disenfranchisement. And so to go all gung ho for it kind of feels a little crunchy sometimes, especially for those of us who have grassroots organizing backgrounds and are kind of like down to dismantle all systems, including the Electoral College and the way that we vote. But at the same time, it very much is one of those things where if we don't get this administration out, we're not going to have much of a chance to do any sort of restructuring of power. So I'm excited to go back to you and learn more about what you learned in Atlanta. But before we do, I would love to introduce our final guest today here on Brunch, David, who's tuning in from Colorado. If you could let us know a little bit more about the work that you've been up to, that would be awesome.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Yee, and I am a first-time kind of person in politics. So thank you all for doing the work. I felt a little intimidated being outside the political realm to actually engage and to mobilize and activate my community. But this year, this year is now, it's do or die. If we're not voting, who are you? Are you caring about life? Do you care about my life? Do you care about my neighbors or my family? It is a dire situation. For me, the past 4 years have been an utter nightmare. I feel like I was looking up horror films yesterday because it was Halloween, eating my chocolate and hot Cheetos and some wine and Pringles. But I was like, nothing compares to what's going on right now. The pandemic, the rise of anti-Asianness, social uprisings. We have a president who is unhinged, who doesn't care about people's lives. And so for me, there was no other choice but to be active in politics. I come from the journalism realm, more entertainment, fashion. I'm now a beauty editor. And so for me, I was like, what can I do within the scope of what I do to promote voting? I founded a site called Very Good Light. It's a men's beauty publication, masculine identifying beauty publication. And I was like, okay, what can we do? We have a Gen Z audience. Oh, let's activate the beauty community because it's the most influential community right now. Everyone's looking at beauty influencers. So what can we do to bring excitement into voting and voting blue? And so we launched Biden Beauty. I don't know if y'all heard about it, but we're on TMZ, on Vanity Fair, People Magazine, everywhere. We sold a beautiful Biden Beat beauty sponge with the tagline, "Beat your face, beat out Trump." And so we sold one every 60 seconds. As we know, blue on the color wheel cancels out orange. And so we donated all the funds to get out the vote. It was to engage young people. We started out as an anonymous collective. People were like, who is this? What's going on? Is this real? And we had over 1.6 million views on TikTok within a week. We're able to engage that Gen Z community, but more so activate kind of enthusiasm, get out that vote look, you know, beat your face while you're going to the polls. I had the opportunity to also be the co-chair, the events co-chair for Korean Americans for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. And that, to me, being able to see the work that the community is really doing, activating and engaging and becoming super empowered to get out the vote. I've never seen it before, and it made me so proud to be AAPI. But within that structure, I was able to canvass, I was able to do phone banking, some would say do the most this election. And I really am so humbled that I was able to, you know, serve. And, you know, no matter what happens on November 3rd, this won't be the end of my political activism. It'll only be the beginning. But thank you all for having me.
I love that. Thank you so much. I love your energy. I love the fact that the combination of pop culture and like how beauty has really been able to captivate an incredible audience, and finding ways to leverage that for civic engagement, which traditionally has been marketed and messaged in a very unsexy way, and definitely like a way that's not youth friendly, and oftentimes is patronizing to young people that often are the most insightful and savvy when it comes to engagement. So I love the Biden beauty blender and even going down to the color wheel and eliminating orange from the palette is so
Thank
iconic.
you.
So
it's all
yeah,
about beating out Trump, beating your face. Everyone should try beating your face. If you haven't tried, it's very therapeutic.
I love it. I'm into it. I need it in my life because I'm still like I'm on my pedestrian ass, like blending in my foundation with my fingers tips. So I really actually genuinely need that. I genuinely need that. So yes. Awesome. So as you all can see, scrolling on the bottom of the screen, we are fundraising for the organizations that are represented here today that are doing the incredible work to make sure that have done the work to get the voter turnout to be what it is now. But of course, with the time ticking, there are so many votes that are on the table, literally on the table in people's homes, mail-in ballots that have not been turned in. And I'm excited to hear more, Ricky, in terms of what's happening in North Carolina, because I definitely got a swing left text message that was like, there's 500,000 votes, absentee ballots that haven't been turned in North Carolina. And I was like, oh God, no. But I was like, I'm excited to support NCAAT in Action's work. And I'm also, just would love to hear more from each of you, Ricky and Jennifer, in terms of how things are going. And if you could shed a little bit of light in terms of when folks are donating today, what their money is going towards on the ground. So Ricky, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Hollis. And yeah, definitely in terms of absentee ballots, there's already been like tens of thousands of votes are already accepted. And there's definitely way more out there specifically for Asian American populations compared to 2016. The difference is astronomical. I can do the calculation, but it's just like overshadows basically what's been happening in 2016. In North Carolina, folks can turn in their mail-in ballots in person, and that's something that we're encouraging at their local county board of elections office. At this point, earlier in the early voting period, folks could have also turned them in at the early voting location. That ended yesterday. So anybody who still has their mail-in ballot completed with their witness signature and everything, make sure to turn them in at the board of elections office in their county. They cannot turn in on election day. So if you're there, as election day comes, they could just go to their polling place, and I recommend just vote in person at their specific polling place on Tuesday, and just if they already have their absentee ballot, haven't turned it in by then, just turn it up and vote on election day. Before then, folks again can also turn them in at their local board of elections offices as well. So it's really exciting again for the number of percentage turnout. Already more than 60% of Asian American voters have already turned in or cast a ballot. That's the total number of Asian Americans who cast a ballot has already surpassed that of 2016. There's still more work to do, and I think real folks have already mentioned before, voting on election day is a beginning of the engagement and movement that we need to do moving ahead to build a better future, build back a community that respects human decency. And for everybody who hasn't voted already, definitely make sure to complete your mail-in ballot or go out to vote on Tuesday.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm curious if there's like just any insight that you could give us, because for example, I haven't been to Raleigh, North Carolina in probably over a decade. And, as much as we share a common identity as Asian Americans, like there's obviously a lot of specificity and in our lived experiences. And I'm curious if you could maybe share if there's any insights or reflections that you have on the community and the way that you guys have been approaching organizing there that those of us that are outside of the area might not know.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Hollis. I think the Asian American community in North Carolina is very diverse, and really even the identity of Asian American AAPI is really only recently gaining traction as an identity on its own. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, and myself, I didn't identify as Asian American until after I graduated from college and worked in DC and actually discovered the rich history of Asian American organizing in the U.S. and decided that, hey, this is missing in North Carolina. I want to bring it back. So that's why I moved back to North Carolina and started this effort, NCAAT in Action, back in 2016. I started this effort with my good friend Chavi Kuneru, who is the executive director of our organization, and she's South Asian. Myself, I'm Chinese American. So we both grew up in North Carolina and realized that there's this space that needed to be filled for building political power among the diverse ethnic communities in North Carolina that already have built up this community and cultural and social community, and really need a space to get together and build that political movement. And that's what we're doing here at NCAAT in Action. So there's a movement to in terms of our organizing over the past few months. We've done, I think Jennifer also mentioned some in-language effort that they're doing in Arizona. So we're doing the same thing of hosting in-language phone banks in Korean, Chinese, a number of South Asian languages, Tagalog, and really translating information in multiple languages, including Hmong. And most recently, we've also launched a hotline, a voter assistance hotline, that is specific to North Carolina voting rules. So many folks who are running into problems, they could call that number, which is 919-591-2442. Yeah. Oh, you're muted, I think, Hollis.
Me again. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it sounds like you guys in a short amount of time have done really important targeted work. And I think the in-language stuff is something that's really, really important because, yeah, we know that that's the most important way to reach, especially first generation and immigrant voters as well. So Jennifer, you gave us a really great introduction to yourself at the top of the program in terms of the specific campaigns and the challenges. But I'm curious if you could kind of speak more to that. So that we could better understand kind of who is the Asian American community or the AANHPI community in Arizona, and how have you guys been tailoring your campaigns to suit who lives in Arizona as Asian Americans?
Yeah, so disclaimer, I just moved out here not too long ago. I would say it's been 2.5 years. So I originally from California, Los Angeles area. So I gotta admit, when I moved out here, I was in culture, social, everything shock, because I was just so used to the progressive nature. I've been organizing in the AANHPI community for about 10 years, and I've been doing civic engagement for I would say about 6-7 years. So when I moved out here, I was just kind of in shock to see like how much more conservative it was out here in the community. So that's why I was just that to me was a challenge for me because I was just not so used to it. And the communities, let's just say like each community, it can be fractured in a way. Let's just say there's like two Vietnamese community doing the same thing because the leadership didn't get along. So just navigating even stuff like that, like was really difficult. But how I kind of overcame that is just really recognizing what communities or what organization groups are more progressive, and just reaching out to them and doing more relational organizing. That's how we've been able to communicate with our communities, with trusted leaders. Doing youth organizing has been amazing, because one of the things that I've noticed, or just even in past organizing, is really because of the language barriers. I'm going to give myself an example. My parents immigrated here from China, and they hardly spoke English, or they don't speak English too well. So growing up, I would have to help them sign all these papers, help them navigate everything in language. So I think even in this community, it's the same thing. Like the high school students, the college students that we are organizing with, like they could get the information that they learn and help their aunties, uncles, grandparents, their parents register to vote, get them information on like the ballot measures, the candidates, and all that. So to me, that has been one of the key focus in how we're organizing. I mean, we're doing the digital, the mailers, the canvassing, like I mentioned before, but I feel like, the relational organizing piece has been really key in making sure that, where the information is getting to our communities. And our young people have been key in that, doing that as well. Like, so my parents, like, they didn't register to vote until like I would say the Obama elections, and they've been here like for 30-40 years. So it's really like having our, the kids are the ones that will help them navigate that system. Like, so that to me has been one of the things that really have been working well out here in Arizona when we do the organizing and voter engagement.
That's awesome. And I think that's so important, just the intergenerational focus, right? Focusing on youth voter outreach, but also thinking about our parents that aren't particularly civically engaged and often just don't really see themselves reflected or spoken to. So I can imagine why, they don't feel particularly encouraged or like they need to prioritize voting, because so often especially in this past year, it's like if there is any focus on the Asian American community, it's because they've been targeted in a xenophobic way. And the fact that even watching I didn't watch any of the Trump debates, because that's my self-care practice, is just trying to minimize the amount of times that I hear Trump's voice at any given time. But when I was watching the Pence-Harris debates, it was just so crazy to me how normalized it is to say that COVID, like the reason why we're having a COVID epidemic here and it's so grossly mismanaged, it's China's fault. Like, and the fact that parlance has just become normalized is so deeply unsettling. And obviously I do a lot to like shield myself from the way that we talk about it, or the way that there's mainstream conversation about it. But this is really damaging. Like, these are damaging sentiments. And obviously in the grand scheme of things, like, we need to be sensitive to the fact that there's a lot of like kind of state violence that Asian Americans are traditionally not subjected to. But this is absolutely a type of violence that impacts our communities and the ways in which we are perceived and targeted and ostracized for a health crisis that has literally nothing to do with other countries and has everything to do with our own mismanagement. So anyway, that's my little rant. I'm curious if we could, so first of all, thank you so much, Ricky, and thank you, Jennifer. And I wanted to actually highlight, we have Min here, who, thank you, Min, so much for donating to our cause. I just wanted to give you a shout out, but also that we all hope that Arizona turns blue. So I'm curious, Day, if we could go over to you, because you've actually just been working with Grassroots Law Project, specifically around influencer engagement and kind of getting on the platforms of celebrities to talk in a meaningful way about voter engagement. Curious if you could talk more about that work, and also just any insights that you learned being in the South, because again, like, there's a really strong, I know that I had family for a certain amount of time, Chinese American family that lived in Georgia and Alabama. And I think that's like a very oft forgotten voting bloc is Asian Americans in the South. I mean, we're everywhere, but I mean, especially in the South, as reflected by what Ricky was saying. So I'm curious if you could just tell us more about what you learned.
Yeah, for sure. I just got my steak and eggs in. Never had that for breakfast in my life. I was like, I heard people eat steak in the morning, so I guess I'll try. I think I regret it, but it's good though. It's good. I just came back from Atlanta. Yeah, I think being in Seattle, Hollis, you probably, I don't know if you can relate to this, but it's such a, I don't know how to say this without sounding patronizing, but it's a very highly politically educated area. And I think a lot of times being in that echo chamber bubble, it's really hard to realize like where other people are at in their, whether it's civic engagement, community engagement, etc. And, you know, I'm not so much giving excuses for quote unquote influencers or celebrities, but a lot of these areas that the influencers I've been working with come from, there's not a lot of civic engagement happening. And that's, you know, by design, right? I think everybody on here has a baseline understanding that the system was not built for a lot of people it's preaching to. It's usually built for the upper middle class, stereotypical, maybe suburban white American. And so I think being in Atlanta, where I do also have family there as well in like the Lithonia, Stone Mountain area, it was really refreshing for me to get remotivated on this last real big push. One of the people that I got to work with down there was Offset, and Offset was really vocal and clear about how this was the first time him, being a mega superstar he is, was even able to vote because of his felony record and how the system disenfranchised even somebody with that type of platform. And he reemphasized too that many of his peers and community members he grew up with, you know, are also still in that situation. And so plugging him and his groups in with different types of attorneys and advocates to kind of rewrite that ship. But we're still a very long way away from that. And I think somebody like me who really cares about the ground level organizing can often take something like voting really for granted, you know. And it's been, you know, I'm just going to be really transparent. Joe Biden was not my first choice when it came to options on taking out Donald Trump, but this is where we're at right now. And I had to really look at myself in the mirror as somebody who also grew up in Section 8 housing in Hawaii and didn't really feel properly represented by my own elected leaders. What does this current time call for? And being in communities where there's not the level of political education and that type of privilege happening, like a lot of these circles that I'm in Seattle, even saying some certain words like political words like disenfranchisement or whatever, I can't even say it properly either, but people didn't know what we're talking about, you know, so we had to kind of take a step back, break it down, and become a lot more accessible in a system where accessibility is definitely not a priority. You know, voter suppression has been real. A lot of the folks on this panel right now have been working hard to eliminate that. The ballot coming in looking very confusing is definitely by design, I believe, on purpose. And yeah, one of the things that one of the people pointed out in Atlanta is that they the moment that they feel that something doesn't relate to them, they're just going to take a step back, and they don't understand that, actually, especially on the hyper local level, if only a certain number of people are voting for certain races like DA or judges, then of course those individuals who are being voted into office where the voter turnout is low but they are winning, they're not like, what is their incentive to represent the folks who are disenfranchised, aren't able to vote, aren't properly represented? They can say all these platitudes and platforms, but at the end of the day, these elected officials are trying to get elected into position every term cycle. And so their top priority is to keep their jobs. And so unless we can continue to get more people who don't feel represented out into the polls and voting, what other ways are we going to be able to keep these people being voted into office accountable unless we show up in those ways? And so Atlanta was an interesting trip. Glad to be back home in Seattle. I definitely did not want to be not home on Tuesday, just in case, but I am hopeful. Yeah.
That's awesome. I know I've kind of facetiously kind of not been like, I'm prepared to flee by foot if that's what needs to happen. But yeah, I think staying home or staying close to home, I think I personally had a kind of opposite impulse in that I was like, the idea of being stuck at home on Tuesday night is terrifying for me. So that's why I kind of like, I was just like, go to Phoenix.
Honestly, I got there and I had to take a COVID test, obviously, before I got on set. And selfishly, I was like, oh my God, like, I don't feel any symptoms. I mean, I could be asymptomatic, but if I get tested positive, I have to quarantine here for 14 days.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do I do? I don't know. I guess I could drive from Georgia to Washington State while I'm sick, but negative, thankfully. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much for bringing up all those points. I think the point that you're making, both about the disenfranchisement of folks that have been criminalized in the criminal justice system, as well as making sure that our messaging is accessible and relevant to the people that we're talking to. And I think oftentimes when we get into our nonprofit circles or like organizing circles, the echo chamber becomes really strong, and we're speaking in a language that just simply isn't relatable or translatable to folks that are needed, because we're not trying to approach this in a condescending way where it's like, you should know better than to vote for things that we know, but it's really like soliciting the insight and the lived experience and the perspectives of the folks that don't traditionally vote or can't traditionally vote because they're barred from it in the voting process.
Yeah, and just real quick too, like somebody like Ice Cube, right, is like had this whole controversy, had this whole I forgot what the exact plan that he presented was, but people forget, like, he presented it to the Dems and the Republicans, and the Dems said, hey, like, we'll get to it in a sec, after the election. And the Republicans, do I believe that they're genuine about that? No, of course not, 100% not. But they knew they could take advantage and tokenize individuals like Ice Cube, Wheezy, whatever, and be like, yeah, take this plan, we'll incorporate it. Like, and that's what I feel like a lot of people felt in 2016 was not heard. Not like, oh, you didn't visit me, you didn't come to my job that is full of labor workers, you didn't come visit me in this state or area. And I think that's where we on the left have had to do a lot of catching up and making sure that we're properly representing those who felt disenfranchised and left out of the process. I wish those celebrities who came out and endorsed Trump didn't happen. Do I think it's going to make that big of a deal? Probably not. But I think it's just another snapshot of, like, we need to make sure that we're properly representing people's voices. And when people feel like they have an idea, we take those steps to invite them in and not kind of stay in our ivory tower, siloed away from everything, thinking that we know best for every single person.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. It's just, I think folks sometimes that are doing the grassroots outreach, and I wouldn't say obviously the two organizations or the three organizations that are represented here, I think have done an incredible job of not only meeting voters where they're at, but also learning from them and really understanding that it needs to be an exchange. Like, this cannot be a one-way didactic lesson. It's really about like evoking people's perspective and evoking people's enthusiasm, and it's not about shaming people into it.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing up all those points. That was great. And I think that's a great transition into your work, David, because I feel like your work is really doing that. And you're tapping into a very hyper-connected, hyper-engaged population of young people, and just ensuring that civic engagement is just being infused into the environment that they're in, instead of provoking, like, I think a lot of times it's that same old dynamic that we see where it's like, you know, people, like, organizers expect people to come to their table when really there's a much bigger, much more vibrant table being set, and organizers need to find an authentic way to go meet them where they're at. And you've been in that world, and you're a new organizer. So I'd love to hear more about the insights that you've learned from your organizing work in the beauty world.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think when we're talking about Gen Z, when we're talking about millennials, I mean, this is the generation that almost feels unseen and unheard, because for far too long, they haven't seen politicians who really look like them. I do believe that the voice of Gen Z comes from AOC, just because of how she's able to engage with this community on platforms that they know. I mean, one can only need to look at, you know, Twitch to see how many followers viewers she had. 400,000 viewers came to see her speak and see her thoughts. But this community has long been kind of brushed under the rug. Younger people have never been engaged in politics, but I think it's now different because Gen Z is so much more different than any generation. Even millennials, they were the first generation to be born and birthed essentially with an iPhone in their hands. And so with the wealth of information and knowledge and everything that they have at their fingertips, I think in this globalized world, they've been able to soak in information much more quickly and also engage civically with other folks as well, to really empower themselves and their communities on mobile platforms like TikTok. I think TikTok, for all the controversy it may have with China and politics aside, TikTok has been the most vibrant community when it comes to inclusivity, when it comes to diversity, when it comes to equity, and when it comes to really digesting information and creating information that's very easy to, one, create, but two, to understand. And let's talk about semantics right now. Gen Z is talking language that all Gen Z can understand. And we point to places like crashing Donald Trump's rallies through K-pop and Gen Z, or whether it's young people getting out the vote. They really do think it's a responsibility, and it's remarkable to see just how passionate they are. I mean, in the midterm election in 2018, we're seeing that when it comes to millennials, only 30% of millennials showed up to the polls. But Gen Z is different. And we're seeing that a lot of them have gone ahead and voted early. And I think that's just that generational shift. And young people care about the environment. Young people care about, LGBTQIA rights. Young people care about women's rights and the well-being of their neighbors and those who may not have the shared lived-in experience that they do, but they can empathize with others. And I think that they're just going to change the world. And it's been really exciting as an outsider to see how we can really engage in fresh new ways. I think that politics has been so kind of divisive in the way that, you're here if you're in politics and then you're there if you're not. And politics and engagement has been done in a similar way for such a long time. Why can't we have fun with politics? Why can't we, get out the vote in vibrant new ways? And why do we fear change? And I think that change is coming, and it's just with this generational shift. Believe it or not, younger people are running for Congress, younger people are running for the House, and we're going to see, a Senate hopefully flip this year. But also in the future, I do believe the Senate and the House and representation when it comes to politics is going to skew younger. And that's because the younger vote really does matter. And I really do think that it's just an exciting time. It's a really interesting time to be alive. It's a very difficult time. But through adversity, we see hope. through adversity, we see a younger generation's uprising, right, with Black Lives Matter and with different social movements. And with adversity, I do think that we'll be able to overcome. As a historian, you know, I wrote my first book, which is coming out in June. It's a nonfiction book about powerful, pretty men throughout history. It's called Pretty Boys. But throughout history, what I've seen as someone who's delved into the book and records is that history does repeat itself, and history comes back, and you know, the power it is like a pendulum. It swings from left to right to left to right. And I think right now we're going to see a blue wave, hopefully Tuesday, with all of my anxiety and just fears. It's going to, you know, be diminished when we see a Joe Biden, Kamala Harris ticket in power. But I really do believe in the future. I am so hopeful for change, and that really is because of Gen Z. And I really do think that we're going to rock the vote.
Alice.
We're going to rock the vote, like I was saying. We're going to rock the vote. Okay, so that being said, I'm just really interested in how I, as a civilian in many senses, what I can do to continue kind of, you know, going on this movement of change. We don't know what's going to happen on Tuesday. Varun, I would love your kind of insights of what I can do when I don't work professionally in politics, what I can do to continue the civic duty of pushing culture forward.
Yeah, let's see if we can. I can move my. I don't know if you can probably hear me, but maybe you're
I can hear you.
You're just seeing David right now. So as
you're just seeing T.
David's an influencer, so he's used to this. He's especially in the beauty world.
This is the voice of God speaking behind David. So you know. I just want to say, first and foremost, I just want to acknowledge each and every one of you, because you're so inspiring. I hate to admit, I'm probably twice most of your ages, and I'm just so inspired by you all, because you all are wise, and I don't think, you know, folks of the younger set get enough credit, you know, today about the level of wisdom. And it's unfortunate, I would say, maybe some of that wisdom, frankly, has come because of the unprecedented time that we live in right now. You know, you were forced to take on things on your shoulders that most youth should not have to care about in hundreds of years. And most youth probably didn't since, frankly, Hitler. Right. And, you know, and I don't mince words when I say that this is what's at stake right now. Right. Like the future of America, or us going back 100 years. And I mean, so there's a lot at stake. And so, but I want to make a couple other pitches real quick, because I know we're running out of time. And that is the two C4 organizations that Jennifer runs and that Ricky represents in North Carolina and in Arizona. Why do we need organizations like this, right? I've been involved in politics for over 30 years. And I can tell you the reason we need organizations like these two and many others around the country, frankly, is because somebody needs to keep going, keep active, year-round organizing, 24/7 organizing, right? And, you know, a lot of people are involved in the party, and I don't want to badmouth the party. There's a place for the party, but they don't do year-round organizing, right? They stand up during elections, and then they stand down when there's not elections, and that's not a recipe for success. And so how this relates to, you know, the work that Hollis and David and Day all do as outside activists is that we need that ecosystem to stay active and stay alive, right? Because we took our eye off the ball. Adults, not that you're not adults, the older adults, we took our eyes off the ball. I mean, during Obama, we lost 950 state legislative seats around the country. And those state legislative seats are the building blocks, frankly, for congressional races and Senate races. And we're now controlling, you know, this is how often does a major election, a presidential election, occur the same time that you're doing redistricting? It happens once, but every 20 years. And so this is what's at stake. This is, all hands on deck. But we need both ecosystems to stay alive. We need the C4 organizations that do the year-round, 24/7, 365 organizing, but we also need the activist community. But we need you all to become permanent activists, and not like, okay, certainly take a week to rest, take a week to breathe. But do you realize what's happening in Georgia? There's going to be potentially 2 Senate runoff elections. And what David said was so fucking poignant. There is a 33-year-old running for Senate named Jon Ossoff. He is your cohort. He is your age. And so this is why we need to keep all of this alive right now, so that we can help get Jon Ossoff over the top, because it's going to be very likely that not only there's going to be one runoff race in Georgia, there's going to be a second runoff race against against either Kelly Loeffler or that other guy, I can't remember, but the white guy, right? And so, thank you. Yeah, so there's like 2 major Senate races, and by the way, there's also going to be another race in Louisiana that's going to control the Senate. So depending on the composition of the Senate, whether we flip the Senate or not, margins are going to be a little tight. We need to have the biggest margins possible, if for no other reason, to put a stake in the heart of Trumpism going forward. Right? We need to send that message and say, we are not that. We are better than that. We are inspired, and we're not taking your shit any longer. And we hope that this brand of republicanism goes away forever. And that's what's at stake. So that's why we need the ecosystem. That's why we need the C4s. That's why we need, these little babies that like Jennifer's holding up right now. It's for them. It's not even for us. So
we have 3 more minutes left. I would love Ricky or Jennifer, do you have any final thoughts? We have 3 minutes until kind of we get off, but for the AAPI viewers watching this right now, what kind of enthusiasm or what kind of words of advice can you provide for them?
Yeah, and thanks so much, everyone, for uplifting, year-round organizing. And I think another really, 2 other really important things is next year, all eyes are going to be on redistricting right after the census. So that's really, really important. In 2010 in North Carolina, because of redistricting madness and gerrymandering, the state house was shifted over to Republican control, and that had devastating effect on the state for a decade. And this is going to happen again in next year, and so that's why local races and down ballot races are so important too. And one other thing I will mention is these the elections happen every single year. So next year we're going to have municipal elections, and with the Supreme Court now controlled by conservatives, our local officials are the ones who are going to be able to keep us safe. Just as an example, in North Carolina, sheriffs are also elected officials. And just a couple of days ago in Alamance County, the sheriff office pepper sprayed voters going to the polls. And these included 5-year-olds. So, this is so important to really keep an eye on what's happening on our local issues as well, and vote every single year, make our voices heard, and build a future that is safe for all of our communities.
Such a great point that voting doesn't stop in 2020, right? Voting is every single year. And as Americans, that is our civic duty. Thank you. Jen, really quickly, we have a minute left. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I wanted to reiterate what Ricky said. We are working on redistricting local races. There's going to be the legislation. It's not going to close. It's not going to just stop. So there's certain legislation that we are going to be working on in Arizona. One of the things that I just heard recently, and they wanted when somebody wanted our organization to work on, is to try to get the voting age down to 16. So that's something that someone recently reached out to us to see if we could work on that, and I think that would be amazing if young people have a voice. Like they have opinions. They are our future. And I have a 10-month-old. She's rocking the vote onesie. Like, she's a future voter. I'm doing all this. I've been averaging like 1-2 hours of sleep, doing this voter engagement and everything, because I feel like
Yes.
she's the one that's inspiring me to really make sure that our civil liberties are intact for the future, and we have to vote Trump out. Like,
And she has a mother who's,
that's
showing her the way. So thank you for all your work. And Day, to end things with you, I know your steak and eggs are kind of going cold, but what can you tell our AAPI community of what we can do and why we matter this election and in the future?
Yeah, especially for first-time voters, non-traditional voters, disenfranchised voters, obviously. I hope that this mega, huge, highly polarizing election is a step forward into continuing to be engaged year round, every year. We know that odd number years, off years aren't as popular as the normal kind of bigger years. And what I mean by that is, I think people are figuring out that hyperlocal elections matter a lot as well, arguably more. And we are seeing a lot more of diverse candidates of color, non-binary candidates start to come out in these hyperlocal races. And what the wealthy elite, what the conservative powers have always understood is that that's where you hoard your power. That's where you're able to protect your wealth. That's where you're able to rezone your neighborhoods, right? That's where you're able to do all these things. And I think that secret is now out. And so I'm hoping that this Biden-Trump election, we get the victory and we continue to march forward and elect these people into these positions like city council, like county council, et cetera. And yeah, don't stop engaging. Those races aren't as sexy, but they're definitely just as important. But let's get to the Tuesday finish line first.
What's interesting about that quickly, I saw a statistic that 40% of Gen Z is diverse. They're not white, they're non-white. And so our future is definitely non-white, right? Our future looks like us. But I just wanted to add that, it's really encouraging to see AAPIs who are active in politics. And for me, again, being on the outside, I feel so empowered because people like you are here and sounding off and utilizing your voice. So thank you for that. We raised $1,500 in our brunch today. So congratulations. Hollis is having technical difficulties, but thank you, Hollis, for putting this together. And with that, thank you, everyone, for donating and to watching All Asians on Deck. I'm David Yee, joined with Varun. We have Ricky. We have Jen. We have Day. And we have, 2 more days until election. Godspeed. And let's get that blue
You can
wave.
continue to donate. Keep donating if you...
Keep donating. PayPal.me/HollisWongWare or Venmo Hollis-Ware. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy your Sundays.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.